My name is Rachel. I was 29 years old, 9 months pregnant, and already more alone than I'd ever been in my life. Every corner of our modest suburban home in Garland, Texas, echoed with silence, except for the quiet thumps of my baby's tiny feet pressing from the inside. I used to believe bringing a child into the world would deepen a marriage. Instead, it made me feel like a tenant in a house I once called a home. Jason, my husband of 4 years, had changed gradually, then suddenly. Once attentive and tender, he'd become dismissive the moment my belly began to show. He called my prenatal appointments optional, my exhaustion dramatic, and my swollen feet a consequence of laziness. His mother, Marlene, a woman with opinions sharp as glass, only fueled his detachment. I was climbing ladders and painting bedrooms at 8 months, she said on speakerphone one night. Jason laughed. I didn't. Jason worked in real estate finance and claimed to be under pressure, constantly needing time to reset. Every weekend he drove 2 hours north to stay at his parents' cabin near Broken Bow. Fresh air helps me think he'd say slinging his overnight bag over one shoulder while I lugged a basket of laundry with both hands. In private moments, I'd press my hand against my belly and whisper, I'm still here. You're not alone. Those talks were more for me than the baby. I clung to my blog, a quiet digital space, where I posted soft focus photos of my growing bump the veggie soup I made each Sunday, and letters I'd written to my unborn daughter. It was the one place I felt seen. Jason never read a single word. 3 days before my due date, Jason walked in all upbeat energy and empty charm. Pack a bag, babe. We're going to Colorado Springs. One last family getaway before she arrives. I blinked. Jason, I'm about to give birth. He rolled his eyes. You've been saying that for 2 weeks. The cabin's cozy. You'll just be resting anyway. Mom said the altitude's good for breathing. I said nothing. I'd learned objections were like tossing pebbles at a wall. He'd already told Marlene we were coming. As always, my feelings weren't in the plan. That morning the air was chilly, the sky overcast with low-hanging clouds. Jason loaded the car with his fishing gear and snacks from his mother. I waddled behind, dragging my overnight bag, feeling pressure in my hips with every step. I slid into the passenger seat, breathing slowly. A strange warmth spread between my legs. At first I thought I had just sat wrong, but then it hit me quick and unmistakable. A gush of fluid soaked through my leggings and pooled on the leather seat. Jason, I whispered, stunned, my water just broke. We need to go to the hospital. Now. He turned his face wrinkled in disgust. You're kidding, right? On the leather I couldn't move. Please, I need to go. It's starting. Instead of turning the key, Jason threw open the driver's door, stomped around to my side and yanked open mine. Out. Get out. You're ruining the car. I stared at him. I can't. Jason, please. You're strong. You'll figure it out. Call someone. And just like that, he reached into the back, grabbed my suitcase, and dumped it on the curb. Then he drove away. My body shook not just from pain, but from disbelief. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with fingers that barely worked. Before I could even finish explaining, a familiar voice called out. Rachel. It was Tanya, my neighbor 2 houses down. She took one look and sprang into action. Get in. I'm taking you. She helped me into her minivan, adjusting the seatbelt with gentle hands. She didn't ask questions. She didn't flinch at the mess as the car sped down the road, contractions tightening around my middle like a vice. I stared at the gray sky outside the window and whispered to myself, this is the moment I stop waiting to be saved. Because the man I once loved had already driven away, and I knew in that moment he wasn't coming back. The white lights of the emergency room blurred above me as nurses rushed my gurney through the swinging doors. Tanya never let go of my hand, not when the contractions hit harder, not when I screamed, not when tears rolled down my cheeks in thick, silent waves. "You're doing amazing, Rachel," she said, voice tight with emotion. "You're not alone. Okay, I've got you." The pain came in waves, each one stronger than the last. It felt like my body was trying to split open, and for a moment, I wanted to scream at the sky for letting this happen here now, without the person who should have been by my side. But as I focused on Tanya's steady voice, and the nurse gently coaching me to breathe, I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. Hours blurred. Time no longer felt linear, just a messy reel of screams, sweat, and whispered prayers. Then with a final push, and a cry that split the sterile silence, the room shifted. "It's a girl," the doctor announced. My daughter. The moment they laid her on my chest, something in me cracked and poured out a love so fierce and instant, it stole the air from my lungs. Her skin was soft and wrinkled, her face, still purple from the effort of entering the world. But her eyes, fluttering open just slightly, were perfect. I held her close to skin my tears falling freely now, not from fear, but from something else. "Hope," I whispered. "You made it, sweetheart. We made it." Tanya stood by, wiping her own tears. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She looks just like you." I laughed through the sobs, a raw, aching sound. "Thank you for everything." A couple of hours later, after they moved me to a quieter room in recovery, Tanya stepped out to grab coffee. I was drifting in and out of sleep, my daughter nestled beside me, when the door creaked open. My mother stepped in first, carrying a bag of clothes and a trembling bottom lip. My father followed, stiff and silent, but with red-rimmed eyes. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since I married Jason, against their gentle but firm protests. "Mom." My voice cracked. She dropped the bag and rushed to me, wrapping her arms around both me and the baby. We came as soon as we heard she sobbed into my hair. We should have been here sooner. Behind her, my father stood at the foot of the bed, clearing his throat. "I didn't know how to say it, Rachel, but I'm sorry. I let my pride keep me from my daughter. I chose him," I whispered. "Even when you warned me," my mom pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. "You thought love meant loyalty. That's not a mistake. It's a beautiful heart that got hurt. But you didn't deserve what he did." For a long while we just sat there, my mother holding me, my father cradling his tiny granddaughter in hands that had once taught me how to ride a bike. And suddenly, everything I'd lost, the home, I imagined, the security I'd hoped for, it didn't matter anymore. Not in this room. Not with them beside me and my baby sleeping soundly between us. This was family. My mom kissed my forehead, brushing away stray strands of sweat-matted hair. "You're not doing this alone. Not anymore." I nodded, the promise settling deep in my chest. The betrayal still stung. Jason's absence hung heavy like smoke, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The pain had brought something else with it. A daughter. A second chance. And the beginnings of something I never thought I'd feel again. Hope. 3 days after I gave birth, I was just beginning to settle into the rhythm of motherhood. Every hour was a new lesson. How to nurse. How to soothe. How to function on broken pieces of sleep. My body ached, but my spirit was intact, stitched together by the tiny miracle in the bassinet beside me. I hadn't touched my phone since the hospital. My parents kept it from me, gently insisting I rest and stay present. I didn't argue. Honestly, I was afraid of what I'd find. Jason's name, his excuses, his voice. But when Tanya visited that afternoon, something in her expression told me the outside world hadn't stayed quiet. She walked in holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums and sat beside me fidgeting with her bag before speaking. "Rachel, have you seen what's going on online?" I shook my head, instinctively bracing. "What do you mean?" Tanya sighed and pulled out her phone. "I wasn't sure if I should show you, but I think you deserve to know." She pressed play. The clip was grainy but unmistakable. It showed me 8.5 months pregnant, standing beside Jason's SUV, with my hands clutching my belly, the fluid pooling at my feet, my voice shaking as I begged him to take me to the hospital. His scowl, his hands flinging open the door and dumping my suitcase on the sidewalk. Then the car pulling away. I gasped, hand over my mouth. I hadn't even noticed someone was filming. "A college student from down the street caught it," Tanya said softly. "Posted it on TikTok that night. It's gone viral. Over 3 million views in 2 days. People are furious. The world had seen it, what I had lived. And now, they weren't silent. Is my face in it?" I asked, my throat dry. "Not clearly. You're mostly turned away. But people still figured it out. Someone zoomed in on the license plate and traced the registration. It's everywhere now." I sat back in stunned silence, watching Jason's betrayal play out on a tiny screen captured forever. The comments. Tanya hesitated. "They're not about you. They're defending you. Women, mothers, even men, people are saying what he did was unforgivable." I didn't know what to feel. Shame, anger, relief. "There's more," she added. "My cousin works in HR at Polaris Financial, the firm Jason works for. Or used to. After the video hit 1 million views, the CEO got involved. They suspended him first. Then this morning they let him go. Cited reputational harm to the company." I stared at her. "He lost his job." Tanya nodded. "And it's not just him. People started digging into his family. His parents own that bakery downtown, remember?" Of course I remembered. The one Marlene boasted about at every dinner, with photos of frosted cupcakes and quotes about family values lining the walls. "Well," Tanya said, leaning in, "turns out your story struck a nerve. Posts flooded in, boycotts, reviews. Protesters even showed up outside the bakery. They had to shut down." I felt a strange mix of emotions rise in my chest. I hadn't wanted revenge, but justice. That felt different. Still, I whispered I didn't ask for any of this. "I know," Tanya said gently, "but sometimes the truth has a voice of its own. And this time, it spoke loud." I looked down at my sleeping daughter. She shifted slightly, her tiny hand curled like a seashell. The world had seen what he did. And for once, they hadn't looked away. They'd stood up not for spectacle, but for something deeper. For decency. For dignity. For a woman they didn't know left on a curb in labor. And as I watched the last few seconds of that video again, I realized something powerful. That day on the sidewalk wasn't just the day I was abandoned. It was the day the world bore witness. The hospital felt safer than the outside world. White walls, steady rhythms, nurses with kind eyes, but safety I knew was temporary. The moment I left, the real battle would begin. It started 2 days after I was discharged. My father, Greg, a retired judge with a calm but unwavering sense of justice, sat across from me at the kitchen table. My daughter, Ivy, slept in a bassinet nearby the rise and fall of her chest, the only sound between us. "You've done the hardest part," he said gently. "Now let us help you do the rest." I nodded. I didn't have the strength to argue. I didn't want to. Jason hadn't called to apologize, hadn't come to the hospital, hadn't even asked about the baby. But what he did do was send me a message through a mutual friend. "She's overreacting. I just needed a break. A break. From what? From being a husband. A father." That night, I met with Clara Reese, one of my father's former colleagues, and a divorce attorney, known for her precision and relentless focus. She came to my parents' house, hair in a neat bun, a leather briefcase in hand. After listening to everything, Jason's neglect, the abandonment, the video, the hospital stay, she didn't flinch. "You have grounds for full custody," Clara said without hesitation, "and given his public behavior, we'll also request child support and separation of shared assets." I hesitated. "He'll fight it. He always fights." Clara smiled not unkindly. "Then we'll win." With Tanya's witness statement hospital footage showing the condition I was brought in, and messages Jason had sent after the video went viral, messages full of deflection, not concern. We built a case, brick by brick. The most damning piece was a voicemail he left after being fired. I'd saved it without thinking. On it, his voice was raw with rage. "This is your fault. You embarrassed me, ruined my career. If you think I'm going to hand over a dime for that kid, you're delusional." I'd trembled when I first heard it. But now, it was evidence. Cold, clear, inarguable. The legal paperwork moved fast. Clara filed for divorce, full custody, and interim child support. Jason predictably tried to delay. He claimed the video had been misunderstood, that I was playing victim, that he wasn't even sure the baby was his. That last one broke me. But Clara didn't flinch. She sent his lawyer some budget newbie from an online referral, a full packet of medical reports, birth records, and his texts denying responsibility. When Jason tried to shift blame, Clara leaned into truth. At the preliminary hearing, she played the footage from the hospital security camera, me being wheeled in, soaked in amniotic fluid, clutching my belly, my face contorted with pain. She followed it, with a voice recording Jason yelling at me for not making his breakfast the week before. The courtroom went silent. Jason looked small at that table, smaller than I'd ever seen him. Gone was the polished charm, the fake laugh, the smug confidence. What sat in that chair was a man stripped bare by his own actions. By the end of the session, the judge issued a temporary custody order in my favor. Jason's support obligations were set based on his last known income. Clara was already in motion to petition the court for a lien on any remaining marital assets. As we left the courtroom, Clara turned to me. "There's a long road ahead, but you've already taken the hardest steps." I nodded, still absorbing it all. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. But I felt something I hadn't in months. Protected. And that for me and Ivy was the beginning of real freedom. The fallout came faster than I ever imagined. It didn't thunder in it, unraveled slowly like a frayed hem coming undone. At first, I only heard bits and pieces, quiet updates passed between neighbors, screenshots sent by Tanya late at night. But each piece painted the same picture. Jason's world was crumbling. The house we once lived in, the one I scrubbed floorboards of while pregnant, had gone into pre-foreclosure. He couldn't make the payments anymore, not without a job, not with pending support claims weighing on him. According to county records, it was scheduled for auction by the end of the month. Then came the news about Marlene and Bill, his parents. The bakery they ran for 3 decades, the same one where I once stood behind the counter during Christmas rushes, smiling at customers who thought we were a happy family, shut down. Permanently. The community that once adored them had turned cold. Reviews flooded in not about cupcakes, but about character. How could you raise someone like that, complicit in cruelty? Boycott. Those words clung to the storefront windows like graffiti. And then one gray afternoon, an envelope arrived in the mail. My name was handwritten in elegant looping script. No return address. I stared at it for a long time, ivy curled against my chest. My gut told me what it was. Still I opened it. Rachel, I don't expect you to read this, but if you do, I hope it reaches you in a moment of peace. I was wrong. So wrong. Not just in how I treated you, but in how I raised my son. I believed strength came from pride, from appearances. I taught Jason to value control over compassion, to chase image over integrity. I see now what that created. What happened that morning, that video, that decision of his, it broke something in all of us. But it broke nothing in you. You walked away with your dignity, with your daughter. You are the strong one, Rachel. The bakery is closed. Our name is poison in this town, and I cannot say we didn't earn that. If there's one sliver of solace I ask, it's not for Jason, it's for Ivy. I hope you'll never let her feel the weight of what he did. I hope she knows only love. If you ever find it in yourself to forgive not for us, but for your own healing, I'll carry that grace with me for the rest of my life. Marlene, I read it once, then again. I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Forgiveness is a beautiful word, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean rebuilding. It just means letting go of the anger that keeps you anchored to pain. I wasn't there yet. Maybe one day. But not now. That night, I tucked the letter into a drawer beside Ivy's birth certificate. Not out of sentiment, but as a record, a reminder of how fragile illusions can be. The polished man I married had been all surface. The house, the bakery, the tailored suits, they were all part of a facade built on hollow ground, and when it cracked, it fell fast. I thought of the woman I was when I first met Jason Young, eager to be chosen, willing to overlook red flags for the dream of family. That girl would have cried reading that letter, but the woman I was now... She read it with clear eyes. My daughter stirred in her sleep. Tiny fists curled near her cheeks. I leaned over, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "We don't need their sorrow. We have our own joy now." The world had seen the truth. The walls of silence and denial that once surrounded Jason and his family had collapsed. And from where I stood on solid ground with nothing to hide, I finally saw them for who they truly were. The courthouse was colder than I expected, its marble floors echoing every footstep, every emotion I tried to keep buried beneath my ribs. Ivy was with my mother that day. I didn't want her near this part of the process. This wasn't about her innocence. This was about closure. Clara walked beside me, calm as ever, papers in hand, blazer pressed like armor. "Don't flinch," she'd told me earlier. "We're not here to negotiate your worth. We're here to protect your future." Across the aisle, Jason sat slouched in a second-hand suit sleeves, too long collar, too tight. He looked nothing like the man who once took business calls from our patio, wearing designer sunglasses, and mocking anyone who drove a car older than 5 years. That man was gone, replaced by someone hollowed out, angry, and cornered. He didn't have a lawyer, just a folder of disorganized notes, most of which I later found out were printouts of texts, trying to paint me as manipulative and unstable. When the judge entered, the room shifted. What followed wasn't dramatic. It was precise, methodical, and merciless in its clarity. Clara presented everything the hospital intake footage, showing me being wheeled in alone and soaked in amniotic fluid, the witness statement from Tanya, and a montage of voicemail recordings, Jason yelling, denying responsibility, blaming me for his job loss. She ended with a simple statement. This mother has acted with nothing but grace and restraint while enduring abandonment, public humiliation, and emotional trauma. She is the child's sole caretaker and deserves full legal and physical custody, along with appropriate financial support. Jason tried to speak. He stumbled through a defensive rant about how everyone makes mistakes and how she's just trying to ruin me. The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Mr. Carson, you left your wife while she was in labor, on record, on video. You never visited the hospital, never attempted to meet your child. This court doesn't recognize that as a mistake. We recognize it as negligence. Jason sat down, lips pressed, thin rage simmering behind his eyes. Within an hour, the custody order was finalized. Ivy would remain solely in my care. Jason was to pay monthly support based on his last recorded income at Polaris Financial, along with back payments from the day of her birth. Clara had filed a motion to freeze a portion of his severance package, and the court approved it. You're lucky your employer submitted full financial disclosures, the judge said to him. They're protecting their own image, but inadvertently, they've protected your daughter's well-being. Afterward, as I stood in the hallway with Clara, a strange quiet filled me. Not triumph, not vengeance, just stillness. You did everything right, Clara said softly. You didn't lash out. You didn't go low. That's why the system responded. I nodded slowly. I didn't want to destroy him. I just wanted to be free. Clara smiled. And now you are. Outside, the sky was shifting from dull gray to soft gold. Autumn's sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps like a promise. I took a breath deeper than I had in months and let the cold air fill my lungs. Jason stormed past his eyes, avoiding mine, his jaw clenched tight. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because justice wasn't a headline. It wasn't a viral moment or a bitter monologue. It was this walking away with nothing left to prove and everything still to gain. That day, I didn't win out of spite. I won because I chose to stand. And for me and Ivy, that was the only victory that mattered. The texts came in waves. First, the pitiful ones. Can we talk? I messed up. You don't have to do this. Then the guilt-laced barbs. You're punishing me. I've lost everything. You should be grateful I even tried. And finally, the desperate blame-shifting. You made me look like a monster. This is your fault. You'll regret this when Ivy grows up hating you. I read them all in silence, each message vibrating through the cheap plastic of my old phone, like a ghost rattling chains. But I never replied. I had nothing left to say. Jason didn't understand silence. It unnerved him. He thrived on reaction, on raised voices, panicked explanations, tears he could call dramatic. But silence was a mirror, and he couldn't stand the reflection. I blocked his number after the third week. I didn't do it to spite him. I did it to protect the calm I was finally building for Ivy for me. Life didn't become perfect overnight, but it became quiet, the kind of quiet that heals. I started updating my blog again. What had once been a small journal about prenatal meals and baby name ideas was now something else entirely. I wrote honestly about abandonment, about surviving labor alone, about the moment I realized strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the decision to keep going when no one's watching. I didn't name Jason. I didn't need to. The story wasn't about him anymore. It was about recovery. It was about grace. The first post went viral in a small way. Hundreds of shares, dozens of comments from women across the country. I thought I was alone. Thank you. You gave me courage to leave. This is the strongest thing I've ever read. At first, I hesitated to keep going. Was it too raw, too much? But the more I shared, the lighter I felt. Writing wasn't just therapy. It was reclamation. I wasn't just someone's ex-wife or a woman who had been wronged. I was Rachel Carson's single mom to a giggling baby girl with strawberry blonde hair and the deepest brown eyes I'd ever seen. Ivy was growing fast. She was sitting up on her own, grabbing my fingers with strength that amazed me. Every time she laughed, especially at the silly faces my dad made, or the lullabies my mom sang, I felt something stretch open inside me, like space was making room for joy again. Tanya read every blog post. She'd call after each one with her signature mix of humor and big sister concern. "You know you're gonna end up on a podcast or something, right?" she teased one night. "You're like an icon now." I laughed, not because I believed it, but because it felt good to laugh freely again. And yet behind the screens and stories, there was peace I never expected to find. Not in the public attention, not in Jason's downfall, but in my silence. I never clapped back, never exposed our private fights, never released the footage myself. Letting people draw their own conclusions was far more powerful than feeding them bitterness. And that's when I realized the truth. Silence wasn't weakness. It was clarity. It was dignity. Jason may have tried to erase me with indifference, but I rebuilt myself brick by brick with stillness, truth, and the quiet power of not responding. Somewhere out there, he was probably still talking, still blaming, still spiraling. But not here. Not in my home. In my home, there was only music, the soft hum of a baby monitor, and the tapping of keys late at night as I wrote one more post sharing one more truth. And with every word I reminded myself, I didn't just survive him. I transcended him. And silence, in the end, told the world exactly who I was, without saying a single thing. The little house nestled on the edge of my parents' property wasn't grand, just 2 bedrooms, a small porch, and creaky wooden floors that whispered with every step. But to me, it was everything. Peace, safety, a fresh start. After the court finalized the custody and support orders, I moved in with Ivy and left the ruins of my old life behind. My parents, steady, warm, and full of second chances, helped me settle in. My mom filled the kitchen with smells of cinnamon and stew, while my dad, once quiet and distant, now spent afternoons bouncing Ivy on his knee, whispering stories only she could understand. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Sleep-deprived, still healing, I often caught myself bracing for drama that never came. No slammed doors, no backhanded comments, just the soft click of spoons in mugs and the lullaby of wind against the windows. Motherhood became my anchor. Ivy's tiny fingers curling around mine, her soft babbles at dawn, the way her eyes lit up when she saw my face. It all reminded me that love didn't need to be earned through sacrifice or silence. It could simply exist. And then one crisp November morning, Tanya arrived at the door with someone beside her, her son Evan. He stood there in a gray flannel shirt, tall and quiet, with eyes that looked like they'd seen grief and had chosen gentleness anyway. "This is Evan," Tanya said with a smile that knew exactly what she was doing. "He's helping me repair the old barn. Thought I'd introduce you two." We exchanged polite greetings. He didn't try to impress, didn't force charm, just looked me in the eye, nodded and asked if Ivy liked music. "She responds to jazz," I said, surprised at my own honesty. He smiled slow and real. Good taste. It started small conversations over porch coffee, passing glances during backyard cookouts, the occasional babysitting help when my mom needed a break. Evan never pushed. He just showed up. And not in big dramatic gestures. In the little things. Fixing a crooked cabinet. Installing a better light in Ivy's nursery. Showing up with groceries after the first winter storm hit. All without asking. He listened when I spoke. Really listened. And when I shared pieces of what I'd been through, not in detail, just the shape of the wound, he didn't flinch or try to fill the silence. He just said, "You deserved better. I hope you know that." One snowy evening, he knocked on the door, carrying a small box. Inside was a wooden bracelet carved carefully by hand. My name and Ivy's side by side. "I don't want to rush anything," Evan said, his voice steady, but soft. "But if there's ever a place for me in your journey, I'd like to be part of it." I didn't answer right away. I looked down at the bracelet, then at Ivy crawling across the living room floor, squealing at a stuffed bunny. My heart didn't race. It calmed. I reached for his hand and said the truest thing I knew, I think. "Maybe we're already writing something new." As the seasons changed, so did I. My blog became more than a diary. It became a voice. Readers wrote in sharing their stories of survival, of quiet courage, of finding strength in the rubble. We were building something together, a mosaic of healing. And me, I no longer measured my worth by someone else's validation. I found it in Ivy's giggles, in my father's quiet pride, in Evan's steady gaze, in the words I wrote under a pen name that no longer hid who I was. One afternoon, I posted a simple reflection. I once thought surviving a broken marriage was the end of my story. But it was only the beginning. I let go of someone who couldn't see me. And in doing so, I saw myself. Motherhood didn't erase me. It revealed me. Not just a survivor. Not just a mother. But a woman finally living as her whole self. And that was the most beautiful ending of all.